We watched it. We stood there. Yeah. It was like there was a scheduled car wreck, and we went to watch it. No, we worked with these animal trainers, and thank God this kind of movie isn't made anymore. All these animals are done. It's done digitally, and it's better for the filmmakers and for the animals. But we learned some harsh lessons really quick about these animals, because we had all these plans to shoot all these scenes, and the first meeting with the trainer said, well, I read your script, and you better be aware of a couple of things. When we bring the cat on stage, he will want to eat the bird. And he will also want to eat the ferret, and he will also want to eat any horse in the scene. So, that, like, all my shots are thrown out the window.
The eagle
All right, an eagle will eat the ferrets. We had a lot of challenges in that respect. But at any rate, it had been drummed into us that the cat would eat the ferret. And so, it's no secret that Paul and I had a lot of creative interference by the financiers, and one of the financiers came to us at the end and said, the film needs to end with the cat kissing the ferret. And the first thing out of my mouth, the cat will eat the ferret. All the seconds, the cat will eat the ferret. And he said, no, we must shoot it. And so Paul and I went out and talked to the animal trainer, and he goes, the cat will eat the ferret. So we went back, and as I wrote in my memoir, it's a true indeed, it's a shameless plug if you ever get a chance to check it out. All the stories of making of the Beastmaster are in that. So I went in there and pulled out the director trump card, and I just said to this financier, I will not shoot this scene. And he said, fine, I'll shoot it. So he was the money man, and he got with they brought the cameras out, and Paul and I couldn't stay away, even though we thought we were going to see this execution of this poor little ferret, right? And so the animal trainer was in, he had his shirt off. He didn't look like Mark Singer, but he put the little pouch with the ferrets, and he says, okay, we're ready, bring out the cat. And they bring out the cat, and we're, like here watching it, thinking, oh my God, this poor ferret's gonna get eaten in front of our eyes. And so they roll camera, and action, and the stuntman turned, and they were face to face for a moment, and you saw it on screen. The cat, I think he was so surprised, he just looked at the ferret, their little noses touched twice, and the animal trainer spun away, and he says, cut, that's it! And so we lucked into that shot. But
I ended up with the two baby ferrets. I had them for 6 years as pets.
Excellent care of them, and I could go over and visit them whenever I wanted. It was great.
There's so many places we could start, but let's just start at the beginning. There was a book called The Beastmaster. It was the same basic idea about this warrior guy who talked to, somehow communicated with animals, but that's about as far as it went. This is not an adaptation of that. Can you walk us through how, your history with this book, and then how you kind of turned it into this screen?
The writer Andrew Norton was a terrific science fiction writer, and I read it when I was in 6th grade and was really impressed. But it took place on another planet in a galaxy, and the Beastmaster was it had a title, which was great, and it always stuck with me. And then I told Paul the idea, and where did it go from there?
It took off, and we spent a lot of time writing it, but like you said, Steve, it really is just the title and the idea of someone telepathically communicating with animals, different animals actually, and everything else was just brand new afterwards.
I read somewhere that your thought process, while you were writing it, was that it was sort of a samurai film crossed with a Disney animal movie.
That was it. And as I hear it now, I go, that's a brilliant idea. Paul and I actually, there was this old regime at Disney And we'd had some success with Phantasm, and they invited us over to pitch any ideas, and we had this script, and we pitched hard to the president of the Disney Studios. Oh, it's going to be the, you know, they'll have the animals, and the kids will love it.
It was Walt Disney's son-in-law.
Right, that's right, yeah. And, you know, okay, right, not for us.
So talk a little bit some more about the writing process. And was there any research that you did? Is there, you brought it back to earth, I assume? Although, I don't know.
Okay, here's what came. Yeah. So there was this sci-fi, you know, novel for teenagers, which was The Beastmaster. And as a kid, in addition to liking sci-fi, I was just nuts for, there's a term for it, I think it's called peplum. Have you ever heard that term? It's described for, like, they were called sand and sandal movies from, like, it was starring this great muscle guy, Steve Reeves. There was Hercules Unchained and a series of films that he did, which basically had this, you know, big muscular guy would come in and he would fight the bad guys and he'd pull, you know, use his muscles and pull down the pillars of the temple. And so the idea which I proposed to Paul was, well, let's take this idea and push it back into like the Bronze Age, and that's what we did. Keep in mind, we were pretty young. We made this movie when we were 26 years old, and you know.
So let's begin the discussion of the financing and where that came from and why was it almost immediately problematic.
Yeah, the first 3 movies that we did, total 100% control. We raised the money ourselves, and we could do anything we wanted as long as we wanted. But for some reason, even though Phantasm did pretty well, and of course it became a cult favorite, it's hard to get people interested in it. And there was a guy who had distributed the movie Phantasm in Austria and Germany, and he said, "Hey, I'd love to get involved in your next project." So we approached him, and he said, "Yeah, it sounds great, let's do it." And that's how we got the financing. But unfortunately, the trade-off is we didn't have final cut or 100% control to do whatever we wanted as long as we wanted. So that led to a lot of onset stress. Aside from just working with the animals and kids, I think we had that stress as another layer. But we lived through it and dealt with it.
Yeah, there was more creative interference than we'd ever had. From getting pages of screenplay from the financiers to later, in terms of casting, of course, we had some difficulties, and then even into editing, where Paul and I were able to put together a cut of the movie, and then we're shown the door, and it was edited by the financiers.
You get these, I'm just wondering about these pages you're getting, these rewrites because I don't think English is their first language, so what do those pages even look like?
I don't know, but some of it's still in the movie, and there's some wonderful lines of ours that are still in the movie, and then there's some groaners, and I like to think that they didn't come from us, but Yes.
You mentioned casting. Can you walk us through some of the people that maybe you went to first, or that were presented to you that you rejected, or because I've heard about alternate casting for just about every cast member in this movie.
Our favorite one that we really wanted, we saw every young actress in Hollywood at the time, and just didn't find the right person. We finally, this woman came, an actress who was starring in General Hospital at the time.
She was 18 years old, and just perfect for the role.
Wonderful. She came back 3 times, and I would read with her actually, because Mark wasn't around. And she was just terrific, but the financier said, no, she had a very kind of gravelly, low voice, which was great sounding. He says, I've talked to sound engineers, and the mic won't pick up her voice. So, and we won't be able to use her. So we had to pass on Demi Moore.
Then he met Tanya Roberts and was knocked out.
Because we had a Bronx accent in the Bronze Age.
There were some other interesting casting choices. Now, Paul and I adore Rip Torn. He's really one of the great was one of the great actors of his time, and he was so wonderful to us, such a cool guy. But he was not the first choice. So, I mean, the first choice was Klaus Kinski. And, it turned out that he cost $5,000 more, and I said, look, we can find the $5,000 somewhere. We'd like to know. And so that didn't happen.
The whole movie was shot in 12 six-day weeks, and we had Rip for just two of those weeks in a row. So we had to really plan things very well to make sure we got all this stuff.
I understand Rip had some ideas about the physical look of his character.
Let me tell you something.
Yes.
I think that was one of the successes of this restored version that we saw there, because he came in one day. First day, yeah. And so he's this classic. I mean, he was from the actor's studio. He'd been in, all these wonderful movies. And he goes, yeah, I want to be in this movie, number one, because I love the title and I know it's going to be successful. But I see this role and I'm going to play it as a turkey vulture. And it's like a 26-year-old filmmaker. I'm torn. What do you say? Okay. He got with the makeup and they made him this like beat nose thing that was made out of wax, and it would delaminate after about an hour in the sun. Terrible challenge in that respect. But during the restoration of this version, it's why, because it was funny when there's one key moment where he spins when you first meet him and you see him in profile. And in the old days, people would really groan because you could see the seam of the nose, but they wiped the seam away. So I thought it looked pretty good for a turkey vulture in this version.
You said earlier that you basically got kicked out of the editing room. So because it was your idea to play this film this week. You wanted to play this version of this film on the screen, but looking at it and knowing it's not your cut, have you kind of come to terms with the fact that people kind of like it this way?
I've met a lot of people who love the movie, and so my criticisms, I keep them to myself.
And there's no other versions. This is just the restoration.
But Paul can give you an example of the editing room. You can tell him about the Irwin Yablans.
It's just the guy didn't really know what he was doing. Just done some commercials overseas, and so he would just ask opinions, and whatever opinion he talked to that day, he'd come in, I have a great idea. And he'd tell us, I don't know, I think he really, it's tough to talk.
Leave that one then.
I'm gonna keep pounding that one. No,
Thanks, Steve.
let's go back to your animal, because in the poster, it's a panther, a black panther, and here it's a tiger painted black. And at first I thought, when I was watching, I thought, maybe there are black tigers in the world, but there's a scene near the end where the tiger is licking itself and you see black on its tongue. And I'm like, oh no, that just died or something, did something. And so, but I still think it looks cool. Like you can spot parts of the tiger's stripes in its face. I still think it looks like it's designed that way.
In the early part of the filming, when Paul and I thought that we had creative control, we found a trainer who was assembling the Black Panthers in Hollywood. That's interesting. Actual Black Panthers, because we were going to use a Black Panther. Although they did warn us that Panthers were very hard to work with and didn't take direction. But then the powers that be, the better minds, had a lunch with somebody and said that we needed to hire another animal trainer, and that one came on with this idea of using tigers dyed black.
I think they had the tiger, they didn't have the panther, so of course it was a great idea. That's just tigers.
And then you also have, because you normally in these sort of sword and sorcery things, the bird is a hawk, and you have an eagle, which again, I'm guessing, are harder to train or maybe untrainable?
Let's stop here. None of the animals in this movie were trained. There's no training. Animals go to the food. That's it. So any movement of any animal on screen has to do with off-screen food. Like the cat, if you wanted the cat to run, you would drop a shovel full of cooked chicken on the ground, and that cat would go at 100 miles an hour. And the ferrets were slightly trained where they would go to a beeper where the food was. And so there's that cool scene we're very proud of there, where the Beastmaster is looking for where the heavyset guy lives, and he takes the ferret, he puts it on the ground, and the ferret goes to door 1 because he's going to a beeper. Then the beeper stops, and then door 2 starts beeping, and he goes over there, and then he goes finally to door 3. And so it looked like he was trained, but he was just going to the food.
And what about the bird? What about the eagle? What's like how?
The eagle, it's difficult to get eagles. So we borrowed one from the San Diego Zoo, and so we had them for, I don't know, a few months, I guess.
Well, we didn't do it, but the trainers had some in where they were, I don't know.
Yeah, but what we just kind of, you see the movies where you've got the people with the hawks on their above the hand, and it just takes off and soars and does things. But eagles don't do that. And so, if you want to get a lot of the shots we had, you can't just get them to go up high. You saw that they'd go from the top of a gate down, but to get up for those soaring shots, we had to get a balloon with a basket below it, put them in that, take them up like, I don't know how many stories, and then release the door in the basket so you could then come down and soar and get all those footage. And then the other thing we did is a pickup truck with a pole out the window, or out the back of the pickup, and he would just stand on that, and just like we'd go like 40 miles an hour with the camera, and just filming him from the side. It looks like he's flying through the air.
One of the things the restoration really brings out is this beautiful location. Where did you shoot this? How did you get? Yeah, just
Well,
talk about location.
anybody here been to Las Vegas? Well, just like 30 miles outside Las Vegas is a national park called the Valley of Fire, and you can visit many of the key scenic vistas that we shot there. But the rest, we lucked into a couple of our location scouts, found this property outside of Los Angeles in the town of Simi Valley that was owned by the 76 Union Oil, and you went and made a deal. They gave us access to it.
I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of acres it was, and we just had free reign to just go and build a pyramid and build pits, do whatever we wanted. They didn't care. It was just all land. So we did that, and we had only 3 days in Valley of Fire to get all those really beautiful shots. Everything else was there, and then in a sound stage. And then actually, when he comes running, right after you meet Mark as an adult, the Beastmaster, he's running along a river swinging his sword. That was actually someplace else. That's the exact spot where the whole Twilight Zone catastrophe happened. The helicopter came down right on that spot where he was running in that river. Yeah.
Let's talk about Mark a little bit, because he primarily up to this point he'd been known for television. I think he'd been in some movies, but not like in a leading role like this. And he really seems to commit. I mean, he did the training with as much whatever training he could do with the animals, and I mean, he's a gorgeous human being. Like I've never seen more like outer male thigh in my life.
He had muscles where men aren't meant to have muscles.
But just like, how did you land on him?
Well, we were struggling for a while. In fact, just a side note, I just thought, did anybody ever see that great film called The Warriors, right? Yeah. So we brought Michael Beck out, who was the lead in The Warriors, who had a pretty good physique, but wasn't really built up like that. And when we met him, he was, not as imposing as what we thought. And we struggled for a while. We had some of the other cast, and then one day a casting director mentioned his name, and it's like, every once in a while you see an actor in something, and it just stays in your mind. And I had seen him on public television. He done a version, Mark Singer, of The Taming of the Shrews, Shakespeare. And it was a very robust, physical, he was, hanging off of the rooftops and jumping, and, he was great. And I just always thought he'd be great at something. And then when she proposed it, I just said, oh, that's the Beastmaster. And so we went with him and met him, and it worked out.
And I hope whoever was in charge of greasing him up got a credit in the film at the end, because no credit, just the sheer pleasure.
It wasn't greasy. It was baby oil.
I think I heard Joe Lynch, the filmmaker, say that Mark Singer is like the perfect amalgam of, was it Luke Skywalker and Arnold Schwarzenegger? Like that's, I think that's a fair assessment. And then what? So Tanya, again, Tanya Roberts had come off a season of Charlie's Angels at this point, and if I read something, it was because of this movie she got the Bond.
Well, she got the one on the Sheena. Yeah, she got Sheena.
Sheena.
The producers called us.
Oh, yeah.
Was with her and stuff.
But again, how after Demi Moore didn't work out, how did Tanya Roberts?
She came in red, and obviously, the Hollywood, it's like this filtering process, and especially for shows like Charlie's Angels, they want to go through the 100 million females in the country to find like the most amazing and interesting women, and that's how they found her. And when you, literally, some people are really born with this quality of being photogenic, and I do remember that sometimes as lit by the wonderful John Alcott, who we should discuss. It would be like it's just they have the way their eyes are and bone structures. They just through a camera lens they pop. And I remember looking at Tanya through some shots, and you just go, oh, you look to see if she, it was almost like she was a special effect in a certain way. But she did, even being so, she was very down to earth and threw herself into the role and really wanted to be as involved as possible and do as many of the stunts and fighting as possible, which you wouldn't expect from a model type actress.
Before we talk about John Alcott, let me ask you, talk about, because this at this point was the biggest crew you'd ever had, the most number of shooting days, I'm guessing. How did you, tell me about that learning curve for both of you, that learning curve to going to something that was epic.
Well, on the first few movies, Don pretty much did everything. So, he was directing, he was doing the cinematography, did the editing, and so it was a huge change. And it was a very small crew because they were all very low budget. So on this one, which for us was an enormous budget, and of course was really nothing in comparison to normal Hollywood movies, all of a sudden we had a union crew, and so everything was very, very departmentalized. You couldn't do this without calling this person over. So it was, the Directors Guild assistant directors, instead of me. So it was very, very different to deal with all that.
Yeah, and it was different in that respect. But seriously, all through post-production, we were or pre-production when we first started it. We started it at like Phantasm, a little bigger, and then it slowly got larger and larger. And I think our original budget, we were going to make it for $2.5 million, and realized that was completely impossible. But the cash, the money, basically money, including money all I ever got, which wasn't that great, was the movie was made for just under $5 million. It was like $4.9 million. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so John Alcott, Oscar-winning cinematographer for Barry Lyndon, right?
Yes.
But he also shot other Kubrick films like The Shining and
Just a few.
a few of the ones you might have heard of. And Clockwork Orange, right? That was the other one.
And he shot half of 2001: A Space Odyssey as well.
Right. How did you connect with him? Because he was primarily in the UK, right? And then Yeah, and I've heard so many stories about his very specific process, but you please share some.
As he would tell us directly, he said, I couldn't work with Stanley anymore because there was too much waiting around. I didn't want to wait anymore, was what he always said. And then you could tell.
I know, he wanted to get into American filmmaking, and so he was open to just getting his foot in the door over here. And luckily, he connected with us, and we met with them, and he moved his family here. We found a house to lease, and he brought his own, a couple of his own crew with him from England to do the camera operating and everything. And he was amazing. But if a lot of you seen Mary Lyndon, he's famous for just lighting by candlelight. They developed lenses just so he could actually do that. But the depth of field, the focus is like this far. And he also really liked smoke. And he wanted to have everything lit by the firelight, so we'd be inside with those torches, and we would just be blowing our nose and like black would be coming out. It was so disgusting. There was so much smoke, but he was in his element. He loved it.
Yeah, it was very old school. I mean, he didn't use a light meter. He would light to eye, and then he would use a black and white Polaroid camera and take a photo of the scene, and then look at the values in that and decide if it was good. And and the other thing, he carried around. He had this briefcase with about 45 little flashlights of various wattages, and you could just, a scene would be filming, and you might bump into John, and he would be just behind camera with a flashlight just to put a little glow into one of the actors' eyes. So he had a lot of tricks. But I would just now, in public, may he rest in peace. He was a wonderful gentleman, and I will always love him because I had only known him a couple of weeks, and he had brought his whole family over from England to start this new career. And I think we were on day 4 and day 5 that the word had kind of gone out that the powers that be were going to fire me because they didn't think I could shoot action or something like that. And John let it be known that if Don went, he would go too. And here's this Oscar winner, and he would be willing to change his plans like that. And he was a good, decent, wonderful man. And the other thing that was funny, though, very British. And he ran the young Americans who all wanted to work on his crew. He would run them like a military operation, but in a peculiar way. In that, like at lunch, he and his camera operator demanded that there be a table with a tablecloth, and most days his camera assistants would have to serve them wine for lunch. So, very old school deal.
For Don and I mean, we were busy, but if we had time during lunch to go near him, to be able to just sit there and just ask and tell us some Kubrick stories. Tell us about The Shining. Tell us about this. And that was, at our age and loving film, it was just a dream come true to be able to work with him.
Yeah, you did a lot of explanation about how they had pre-lit The Shining with real lights. So it was all proper movie wattages, everything. So you could pretty much walk in at the beginning of the day. So they spent weeks getting the set, and they could click on the breakers, and it would pretty much be lit inside the overlook set there.
There are, in retrospect, when you look at your filmography, this one stands out as feeling it seems strange. It seems like unusual compared to some of the other stuff that you've done, the more horror-oriented stuff, except there are little touches here and there that are like, oh, there he is. No more so than those, I don't even know what they're called, those bat creatures that turn you into goo. So one of the things I love so much about especially the original Phantasm, it seems so many of the ideas seem so random and so I'm deliberately confusing sometimes, I think. And unless you watch it multiple times or get the chance to sit down and talk to you. But what are those bat creatures? What are those supposed to be? So what are they supposed to be? Where did you get that idea?
Well, and the idea is that there's this race of creatures that are bird worshiping. So it works out perfectly for the Beastmaster who's got a bird on his shoulder and he can walk through them and become friends with them. That was the idea. An interesting idea. A lot of the times, see, when I can't look at the movies that I make and make those sorts of judgments. Outsiders like you would need to do that, but I can tell you that a lot of times there'll be an idea that really seems wonderful and cool, and sometimes it takes some stretching to fit it into a story, and some people might find it immature or ridiculous, but I will try to make it work in the context of that movie. And so, for instance, while we were working on the Beastmaster, I was in New York City and I saw this little curio shop and I looked in it and there were all these rings with eyeballs in them, and I thought, man, that would be cool in a movie. How did we fit that in? And so, we managed to.
One of the things I love, and I think they look so beautiful in this, are these long aerial shots that you have. And I asked you this earlier today about, because obviously this is done with a helicopter, but some of them they seem like they're so low to the ground, and I was wondering, was there something else that you used? But because those shots are so long, sometimes we get to hear this gorgeous score a little longer. Can you talk about the score and about, it's Lee, I forgot his last name.
Lee Holdridge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just talk about working with him, and because I know he didn't have a lot of time to pull a score
He
together.
was screwed in that respect. He had like 3 weeks to compose, 90 minutes of music or something. But I don't know, we were getting some complimentary albums from, I don't know, was it from Perez Saraband or one of them? Yeah, and we got an
Matt Steiner, lots of
good stuff. And so Paul and I would listen to it while we were working on this script. And one wonderful score that jumped out was this TV movie version of East of Eden. And you can track it down on Spotify. And it's got this great, majestic score. And so I think both of us were thinking that the movie needed, sort of like an epic, heroic theme type of a deal, and thought maybe Lee could do it. And that again, I know that while Paul and I worked on our first 4 films, and we had the joy with 2 different composers of sitting down at the piano, being like the first ears to hear things. And one was with Fred Meyer and Malcolm Seagrave with that Phantasm theme, which was magnificent. But then the same with Lee, where he sat down and he played it on the piano, and you go, oh yeah, this is exactly what we wanted.
They used an orchestra in Rome to record the entire soundtrack.
Last thing I want to ask you about is so this didn't do that well in theaters, but it was one of the first films that cable went crazy for because it played on HBO and TBS constantly. Cable, guys, is a thing for young people. It's a thing that plugged into the wall and then into your TV, and you could watch movies unedited, usually. And of course the joke always was that HBO. Who made that joke? Oh, Billy Crystal, right? It was
Billy Crystal on Saturday Night Live. I was watching it one night. He was just on skit. He goes, well, you know what HBO stands for? Hey, Beastmaster's on. Tonight, talking to people before it started, so many people say, oh, my family, watched it over and over again. I said, HBO. He goes, oh yeah, on HBO.
Somebody said TBS was the Beastmaster station or something like that.
Second most requested movie after Gone with the Wind.
Wow, yeah, Turner. Like that was a new thing when this was happening, and I mean there were a bevy of as you said, sword and sandals sword and sandals or sword and sorcery movies. At the time, you sort of unfairly got compared to Conan, which came out just a few months before, to this unfairly and inaccurately called a ripoff by some people. But tell me about that. Like, when did you realize people were not only watching it, but rewatching it, and it was like a thing.
Well, it sold a lot of VHS video cassettes. I think was the first thing where we knew that that would happen. And you know, for Paul and I, it was a little difficult because usually when you have a successful film, it can lead to other successful films, but it wasn't that successful theatrically, and it was like in the next 4 or 5 years that it suddenly developed the viewership. We could go into the whole litany on the release of the Beastmaster that MGM really screwed up, mainly because there was no president of MGM at the time. There was some power vacuum, and they just, you know, threw the film out with not a lot of it.
I was on a plane once, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, just talking about how it's taken off in America so much. And wasn't this show, Chevy Chase used to do this like community college? Community. And I'm watching this episode on the plane, and it's a Halloween episode, and Chevy comes out, and he's wearing a whole bulked up suit, like the Beastmaster, and on his arm is an eagle's stuff that's coming out of the costume. It was just so funny to see him playing the Beastmaster on this TV show.
I don't even know if I've told you this. The first time I saw this film in a theater, I don't remember the year, but it was at South by Southwest because there was a secret screening at the big Paramount Theater there that Guillermo del Toro had programmed, and everyone thought it was going to be like his new film, which I don't even remember what the film was at the time, or it was going to be like somebody else's new film that he'd seen already, and this was the film that he played. It was a print. It was a print. I don't know if it was his print. It might have been his print, but somebody had a print, and this was the film that he played. You weren't
I
there.
have never heard of this.
Yeah.
I'm sure you weren't drinking.
I have a photo of the two of us outside this thing. Yeah, and we didn't know until he got up on stage and said what it was going to be. And I think some people were a little disappointed that, but not the people that stayed. Not the people that stayed. But I'd never seen it on the screen, and I was like, wow, I can't believe I'm getting to see this on this giant screen. So yeah, I didn't think I'd ever told you that, but Vespi, your friend Eric Vespi was there too, I remember. But anyway, it was his print. I don't know, does he have a print? Do you know? I don't know. Anyway.
I'll ask him next time.
Yeah. So anyway, they're going to be back tomorrow for after.
Wait, no audience questions? Come on, we gotta. There are some diehard Beastmaster
Today we have
a
time.
couple of questions.
We have a little time. Okay, I want you to get back to your signing. But anyway, anyone have any questions then? I think I see a hand there. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Watching it this time, 2 credits stood out to me. The first was Alf Clausen was an orchestrator. You may not know him. He writes the music for The Simpsons. And the other was script supervisor, which was simply credited to patience. Can you comment on either, both of them?
Well, I'll add no Alf. Alf Clausen was his name, and he was trying to make a name as a composer, and he assisted Lee, because it was such a massive amount of work in doing orchestrations, because I think Lee tended to do most of his own orchestrations, but in this he brought him in to help, and then he went on and did 35 years of The Simpsons, right? Yeah, something like that. Wonderful score. Well, I guess that was also with Danny Boingo.
Hoffman.
Yes,
Patience was the script supervisor at the second unit, and then Jeannie Robinson.
Oh, that's an interesting story. Yes, Paul. Okay. Wait, what was her? Jamie? What was her? Okay, we'll have to look up her name again. Anyway, after Beastmaster, she was one of the writers of the movie The Black Stallion, and she was our script supervisor. Yeah.
Anyone else? I see one on the aisle there.
Yeah, I don't know how this is gonna come off. How did it feel that, because you didn't get the studio behind it to push it, that the Beastmaster ended up getting kind of shoveled into the pile of Conan copies with all the Italian horse shit that also followed?
I'm not even sure what the question is here. Just how did it feel to have this film shoved in with all these other, as we just talked about before, Sword and Sandal?
It was kind of funny though about Conan, because Dino De Laurentiis, who was the producer of Conan, approached us at one point. He loved the Beastmaster. He just thought that Conan should have been more like the Beastmaster says, more tongue-in-cheek. It's very funny, it should have been more tongue-in-cheek. Conan wasn't that. And she talked to us, it didn't work out, but he wanted us to do Conan 2 at Universal. Because he thought so much of the Beastmaster.
Most of the other films of this ilk were R-rated, but you got a PG, even though there's nudity, but there's not really any blood or.
Well, you know, that we always felt that the animals would play with the kids, and that Mark Singer would play with the moms, and Tanya would play with the dads. This is one of those Hollywood quadrant movies. So,
You always wanted it to be.
well, we didn't shoot much blood, in this, as you can see in the sword fighting. There's a lot of old school fencing and what have you. It's not, no, it was not Phantasm.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
All right, yeah, right here on the end.
Yeah, talk about all the main cast members except John Davis. Talk about casting him, share these stories about working with John.
Well, first off, John, again, he wanted to really be involved in all the action. And so, you know, the character in the script had that wooden staff, and he got the staff, and I don't think he put it down for the entire time. He was very effective at all times, was always flat. I think it was his idea, and it was interesting to watch the audience reaction. That moment when he spins his, and he took the kid under his wing, and they choreographed that. It was funny at the same time. It was very cool. Super nice guy, very hardworking. You know, you heard that. I think at the time he got a bad rap because he had left the show of Good Times. Yeah, because he wasn't being paid enough, and I've read subsequently it was true. You know, they were underpaying that cast, and he was a star, and he walked, and it got this reputation as being disgruntled. And he was the nicest guy we could possibly work with.
Rocky, whatever number hadn't come out yet, so Mr. T wasn't famous at that point, but he came in and read for the part with all the gold. Super nice guy, he was really good, but we didn't think he was going to be right for the part.
Anybody else? Yeah, right there.
Hey, I'm like a big kid of the 80s, and like I grew up watching this all the time with my brothers, and couldn't help but think it was like the best He-Man movie that never got made. Do you feel like your movie inspired, if you're familiar with that, like 80s, pop culture toy line at all? It always felt like you guys must have inspired that.
I want to know if you think this film inspired the He-Man toy line.
Well, first off, I was invited to come in and discuss directing Masters of the Universe, which was bizarre because Masters of the Universe was a movie based on a toy line, and the toy line was a fictional superhero type. I mean, yeah, obviously there were must be some similarities, or but they probably drew from some of the other ones.
But we didn't get hit.
No.
Same old story. Anybody? Can't really see toward the back, but all right, whoever's yelling, go ahead.
I have a fantastic question. Were the small dwarves in Phantasm influenced by the Jawas or no?
That's for tomorrow.
Now that's a story.
Let's tell another Jawa.
No, we were.
Come back tomorrow. Come back tomorrow.
We were sitting around at this rental house that we were living in while shooting Phantasm, and our movie Kenny and Company, the second movie, had been distributed by 20th Century Fox. So we had people we knew there, and we heard about Star Wars being shot at that point, and someone said, "Oh, there's these characters that look just like your dwarves in Phantasm." But the Star Wars hadn't come. We sent somebody over the hill to near Westwood to pick up stills to see, and they brought it back, and we looked down and go, "Oh shit!" They do, but no, we were already pretty much done with the movie by the time we ever even heard about these characters in Star Wars, and Star Wars hadn't come out.
Maybe one last
One
question.
last one. Okay. Over there? Is there one? Did I see somebody saying? Okay.
The boomerang, metal boomerang, did that ever work? Who came up with that? Because it's so ridiculous but also awesome at the same time.
Real weapon? Like, I don't even, is that something you guys invented?
Yeah, The idea was to be some sort of a boomerang type of a deal, and then working with the prop manufacturer, he came up with that, you know, the way it, and to have it be like a switchblade, which would pop open, you know, aerodynamically. No, it didn't. If you would have watched how we shot some of those scenes, we put it on a fishing line with a fishing pole and spin it, and then the prop guy would go around with it like this. And you couldn't see the fishing line, so it looked pretty good, you know? Yeah. Anyway, good question, thank you.
Okay, back to what I was saying. They're gonna be back tomorrow after Phantasm. They're also, after this, gonna be in the lounge, continuing to sign and take pictures and all that. So there's a line that sort of goes out the front door, just get in that line. And they'll be, again, like about an hour before show, so about 6 o'clock tomorrow, they'll start signing things in the lounge and then go again after the movie and after the Q&A. So guys, thanks for sticking around. Thank you guys so much. Like the movie.
Thank you, everyone.